Welcome to Frame One. I'm Drysen, and today I'm sitting down with Kristi Wire of Wire Design Company. We are talking a little bit about your journey, and just to kind of give a little brief synopsis, the way Frame One works is this is completely unscripted, very natural, very conversational, so wherever this goes, we go. But the goal is to talk about your journey, the emotions you felt leaving the agency world into what you're doing here today. So just to kind of recap, I want to make sure I got your story right. You worked in the agency world for about 10 years. You left the agency world to start your own design studio about 5 years ago, and you've been kind of just rocking it ever since.
That's correct. And thank you so much for having me today. And one thing is that when starting a business, there's always going to be that fear. The fear of how am I going to survive? How am I going to get new clients? How am I, all those, all of the things that's just based off of survival. And naturally, humans want to be safe.
Yeah.
And
it's a lizard brain kicking in.
Yeah. I had been thinking for a little while in the agency world of when I was building these different strategies and processes for clients and meeting with clients, and realized over time, watching my husband, who is also an entrepreneur,
Yep.
The ups and downs. And one day he just said to me, you're kind of a agency inside an agency. Why don't you go off and do your own thing? Now, 2 entrepreneurs in one house is a little scary on top of that, but there was just like this little instinct or intuition, I should say, of you should really pursue this. Yeah. It wasn't something that I actively pursued in the beginning.
So that calling you had right there, was that something you've always had, or is it once your husband's mentioned it, you're like, oh, yeah, that could be a thing?
There was a little intuition before that, and the biggest reason why I left was I had a really great friend, and he was just a really bright person, like just energy-wise.
Yeah. And
I knew him and his wife before they even met. I was friends with both of them, and I wasn't their matchmaker or anything like that, but he was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer, and they gave him 2 years to live. And he lived 4 years, I think 3 or 4 years beyond. And it was just that, in that moment of life is too short. Why, what do you want to do in life?
Yeah.
That you've always wanted to do. And
that's an intense call to action, like a call to yes, I'm going to make a choice. I'm going to move forward. What was your final moment? You're like, okay, I'm ready. Let's pull the trigger tomorrow, next week, next month.
It was his diagnosis.
Was it?
It really was. And his positivity throughout all of that. And I get a little teary-eyed when I talk about it. But it's so important to realize that you have no idea what tomorrow brings.
Yeah.
And just go for what you want to do in life. And also do the scary things, because the biggest thing is people regret stuff on their deathbed. And I just don't want to live like that.
Yeah. Oh, that God, I got the chills. I got the chills.
Sorry,
right
I'm getting all teary, but it's just, I don't know. There's just something about just life in general that just finding joy, even when things are tough.
Yeah.
I think that's something as entrepreneurs, it's kind of a different breed of people. Not everyone's meant to be an entrepreneur, because it's hard. You have to be so resilient. And there are so many challenges that you don't see, that your employees, your clients don't see, but yet you need to solve these problems.
Talking about that entrepreneur stuff, there's a book I read a little while ago called Entrepreneurial Leap by Gina Wickman. And it was very interesting because it was like a self-diagnosis, help book, trying to figure out, hey, do you have the traits to be a true entrepreneur, or are you more like, a lifestyle business? Because both are fine, but knowing which one you are kind of helps to grow your business. I don't know. It's just kind of an insightful book for me to read, and kind of listening to you talk about that kind of stuff about, hey, do you want to solve the problems and do this and deal with that? Just kind of made me think about that. So I wanted to throw it out for anybody who wants to listen to that real quick or check that out. So talk to me about, as that diagnosis came to be, you're like, yes, I'm going to start my own studio that I'm going to be able to help people build branding packages and build design and do all the stuff you can do for them. As that deadline of I'm leaving my job next week came to be closer, talk to me about how you kind of prepared to make that transition.
I prepared by asking 8 different freelance designers who are in the business for over 2 years, like what are the pros, what are the cons, and like what you would recommend when starting. And that was some great insights, and just it was people that I knew for years. And then also my aunt Kim Rasmussen ran an interior design business for over 30 years, and she worked with like multi-million-dollar clients, and so she helped me craft my contracts and also helped me understand QuickBooks. And I think that's really, those two things are really important.
Got to get the money figured out.
And it's also just contracts having it like half up front.
Yep.
And because in our world, it's just kind of like we do so much up front as far as work goes, and making sure that like that is set for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine that learning curve, okay, I've got to figure out contracts, I got to figure out money. That's a lot of things to learn right off the bat to be prepared for. When you first started freelancing then, did you have all the stuff in place and you were able, not freelancing, but your studio, were you able to have everything in place and run with it then? Or did you still have like growing things to learn over the next few years?
So what I first did was I actually took a whole month off. So I stopped in the agency world on February 1st of 2019, and I'm so glad it wasn't a year later. This would have been a whole different scenario, potentially. But anyways, when I decided on February 1st, then that first full month was building out the contracts, building out onboarding, ongoing, and exiting strategies with not only clients, but also subcontractors. So the way that I run my business is not as a freelance business, which that can be a little confusing to people because they look at me and they're like, oh, you're a graphic designer of one. The way that I've structured it and the way that I've always shared this story is that Wire Design Company is a creative strategy studio where it's a company of one, myself, that does the communication and design and the strategy, but I hire out highly skilled individuals, especially when it comes to websites, as developers, other strategists, and I only take on people who I know personally and have a good track record, and also are business owners as well. So they're not gonna just like flake out and disappear, which is so common in the freelance world. And when I decided to go that route versus doing freelance, I still do a little bit of freelance here and there. If the project is just like this amazing project and want to be a part of that team.
Absolutely.
But for the most part, it's working directly with the business owner or the CEO or the like marketing manager of a company, mostly just leaders who are looking for someone who has a creative vision for them and walking them through the process of what are your pain points, what are your successes, and then visually show that in their branding, which is something that can be so transformative for different companies. And I don't niche down because I really like being that outside perspective, looking in and being like, oh, well, has your audience ever thought about this? Because it's just this different perspective that it helps understand who they are, why they do the things that they do, and what kind of value they bring to the table for this particular audience.
Absolutely. I mean, just for complete transparency, we hired you to work with my wife's photography company. I probably longer ago than I want to admit, to be honest with you. And the process that we went through of you showing and presenting how things could be mocked up and how they could be used was unlike anything else that I'd seen from a freelance basis before. So when I watched it, I felt the word leave my mouth, freelancer, earlier. I'm like, no, that's not the right one. It's a studio of one. So I apologize. That was not my intent. But with that, being a studio owner where you're able to outsource particular parts of the process can also be a little bit scary and stressful too. And a lot of the goal of the people we've been talking to in Frame One is sharing that journey of saying, hey, I have to let go of this creative piece here to have someone who's more talented or more skilled than what I am or has more time than what I do to accomplish that. So let's explore that for a moment here. Okay. The first time that you had to outsource something, talk to me a little bit about that experience.
outsource. So especially when it comes to web development, I outsource pretty much all of that. However, I have discovered a new type of website software where I can actually develop without code. So that's really cool. But I also still lean heavily on web developers, especially when it comes to like hosting environments, because that's a whole crazy world with website hosting, email hosting, all of that. But I'm kind of going on a tangent. So going back to outsourcing, like, can you be a little bit more specific? Like what kind of like...
Just in general so just for total transparency, I don't think I've talked about this at all on Frame One yet. So this is like a first time to share.
Sweet.
My first company was 3 Chord Weddings, and it was my wife and I. We were DJ and photographer together. One reason that we realized we could not scale the business up was because I was too close to the business, and for me to let go of the trust for another person to be able to do as good of a job as what I wanted to do was really hard for me to do. I did not have that ability from an emotional standpoint, which is why in Hyperfocus now, it's different because it's not live and I can trust people. For me, learning to say, hey, I need you to do this thing for me was a major growing curve or a growing point in my career. Did you experience something different the first time you had to say, hey, I need your help to do something that I can't do?
I think when you outsource, it's really transformative because you are putting trust in someone else and in their skill set. And when you can identify in yourself, like, I'm not great at coding.
Yeah.
Like, here's someone who is excellent at coding. I don't want to spend the time or the energy to continue to try and learn, like, to code like they do.
Yeah.
But have a just basic understanding and lean on them for their expertise and ask them questions, bounce ideas off of each other. And I think that's the really important part of running a business is continually learning and communicating with people in a way that helps not only promote their business, but your business as well. And I think it's important to promote their business too. And with all of my subcontractors that I work with, I give them the opportunity to talk directly with the client.
That's cool.
And it's very like hands off in that way. And I think that's just really important for trust. Some people decide that they don't want to do that, and that's fine. It's like it's kind of tailored to how they want to work. And then also I have like a Slack channel with my different subcontractors, and it's just asking, and we have a couple of them, we work together quite often. So with the Slack channel, we have like a set time a day that they like to do it. And then I just, in advance, I'm just like, hey, could we meet this day?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's kind of like building the expectations plus a structure of, okay, this person is available at this time. Let's make sure we do the meetings at this time.
Got it.
And it's just been really a great experience and really enjoy working with.
I love that.
And then also printers here in town, like a printer that does 100 tote bags and then a printer who does 10,000. Like there's different people in town that do, or printers that do better work based on those kind of parameters. So it's like even being a guide to clients when they're doing print work and saying, hey, this company is really good for this, because you're looking at doing tote bags or direct mail or something like that.
Building those relationships and knowing exactly who can do what their specialties are.
Yeah.
I want to take it back real quick to that month you took off to kind of put your processes in place. When you took February off and you're getting up to ramp up to March, what was your confidence level like? Yeah, we're going to crush this.
It was a lot of leaning on my husband, to be honest.
Yeah?
He's a very positive person. I'm kind of more of a negative person, but I would say negativity in the short term and positive in the long term. And I think that's a really healthy way. Well, I shouldn't say healthy way, but it's like, it's a balance of, he's very positive in the now, which has been such an amazing, like he's just like, find a partner that you like balance out with, because he's been a major cheerleader.
Maybe there's something we should talk about there a little bit, is just having that support system when you are venturing off to do your own thing, because same way, I would have given up years ago if not for Aaron being like, nah, Drysen, you're not going to be happy anywhere else. Like, keep going.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the importance of having a support system.
A support system is so important. It's a very lonely journey as a CEO, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, whatever you want to put that title on. And your support system, especially if it's people who are in your same shoes. I think if you're with other entrepreneurs like my husband, Doug, is that, and I'm trying to think of how to describe this. They can put themselves in your shoes too. And they've been through a lot of the same things you've been through. And I think that's where leaning into people who are like-minded, but also having people that have a completely different perspective. My father is an engineer, but I've reached out to him for so much advice, especially when talking with CEOs, business owners, like that kind of relationship, because it was something that I was already doing, but I wanted to improve on it. And I think that's also when starting a business, there's not really a finish line. It's not really a marathon. It's an ongoing, continually improving evolution.
I love that. So when you were getting ready to leave the agency world to start Wire Design Co., what systems did you put in place for like building relationships and reaching out to people? Like, what was that startup phase like for you to start reaching out to new clients, to new businesses?
The biggest surprise that I had was that all of the business, except for one client that I've had, has been all word of mouth. It's been someone who knew someone, and haven't done any type of like the traditional or digital marketing.
Yeah.
And that's going to change here soon. But at the same time, I wanted to reach out to the network that I had built over the last 10 years in the agency and digital marketing world, and just telling people, hey, I'm out here doing my own thing now. I'm doing creative strategy, branding, and websites. And this is the date that I'm available and would love to work with you. And so I crafted up actually this piece here. And this is about 5 years old already, but just putting it in a bright envelope. And then also creating a piece where it's a little bit more
dynamic than just a postcard. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was like, sent this right out at the beginning of the year. So this was before I had left, but I had already put in I think I put in like a 6-week notice. But anyways, it was a New Year's resolution. It said on it. So it was like, went out at the beginning of the year, and it had my business card in it and everything. And I sent out to about 100 people and got 20 replies back. And even 2 years later, people were still contacting. So there's a saying that like print is dead, but I think if it's done with intention and craft and quality, and then also provides value to the person you're sending it to.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest component is a value to that person. And it ended up being where I went from 0 clients for the first 3 months. And about that 3-month mark, I got really nervous because I'm just like, did I make the wrong decision? Sort of thing. But what I did was before leaving on the agency world too, was I saved up a year's worth. Like if shit hit the fan and I wasn't going to have a single person come through the door, have a year set aside. And I said to Doug, I'm really nervous about this. And Doug was like, the worst thing that could happen is you're just going to have to go back and pivot and go back into
agency world
or do something different.
Right.
And he's like, what do you got to lose? And it was just kind of that way of speaking that it was just kind of like, yeah, you're completely right. And so when changing that mindset and deciding, okay, like I got a year, and then that 3 month, so the first 3 months were quite stressful, but it's like every day I went back and I just did the habit of, okay, I'm going to reach out to new people. I'm going to continue to send out proposals. And like at that point I was meeting with people and sending out proposals, but it's just like, I knew that there was going to be a floodgate open at some point, and I'm just like, okay, do I stop now? And it's like, no, keep doing it. I'm just like, okay. And then just kept building processes over that time, kind of that onboarding, ongoing and exiting type systems that I talked about earlier. And what happened was, almost on that 3-month mark, is I met with Matt Poulsen.
Yep.
And it was completely by accident, because I actually had a no-show at Josiah's. And anyways, I saw him working, and he actually had a studio with my husband at the Creative Co-op.
Yep.
And this was years back. And I just said, hey, Matt, I'm starting this new venture. And he's just like, I think I have a project for you. And that's actually how we started, was started with the Early Bird and then worked into Market Beat. And for the past 4 years have been building a lot of their, pretty much majority of their brand. Now they have an amazing in-house designer, and that type of dynamic has shifted. But I'm just so happy for them, and just to see how much their company has grown over the last 10, just all of that, and being a part of that process. And so he was the first client, and within 2 weeks, 18 people had responded to these contracts and were like, let's go. It was the floodgate situation of
oh no.
Holy shit, what am I gonna do? And it's just nope. You just put that hat on of I'm gonna figure it out. We're gonna make this work. And some people had to wait a while, which it's they were open to doing that. And there were some people that were you know what, I really need this today. But it was one of those moments where it's okay, now I need to figure out how much workload can I take on?
What is your capacity? Yeah.
What is the capacity? And luckily, I was able to take on, I think it was 12 or 14 of the clients, and was able to pump out everything in 2 weeks. And that
That's
was, or not
impressive.
2 weeks, 2 months, all of the work with them.
That's impressive.
And that is also a huge, and I'm trying to think how to describe this. Coming from the agency world, the one thing that was really beneficial is how to work really fast and on your feet. And that's something that it's always kind of been in my nature too, is doing things super fast, but also focusing on the quality and getting to the solution as fast as possible.
So when you first started, your services were branding, websites, and creative strategy. Mm-hmm. Have they changed over the years?
It has stayed the same consistently. And I think that's because of they actually can be so diverse. Because when you think of branding, it could be vehicle graphics, it could be internal wall graphics,
Yeah.
It can be logos and all of the umbrella that goes beyond that with elements and fonts and colors, and even going into messaging and voice. The way that you talk and the way you present yourself or your business says a lot about you. And a lot of times that's taken for granted, or is just kind of this kind of hidden visible.
It's almost like a subconscious expectation that when somebody interacts with your brand, it's like a promise of what to expect.
Right. And I think when branding doesn't work is when that promise isn't met, or that expectation isn't met. And there's a lot of great branding and designers and strategists out there in the world, but there's also a lot of not great ones too. And it's finding what fits with your company.
Yeah. This actually might be a fun thing to dive into real quick, if you don't mind, because like I said, the sub goal of Frame One is to inspire the next generation of freelancers to take their shot and start a freelance career, or for people who are currently freelancing to level up and start a studio. So talk to me about the role of how to plan for branding, how to think about branding, and how to implement branding into a small startup company.
The way that I would recommend would be something very, very simple. 4 things. It's why you matter, why your product, services matter to a specific audience, and figure out who your specific audience is. And then the other is to tell your story, because people want to work with people that they like, know, and trust.
Absolutely.
And in order to get from like to trust, you have to share what your services are, how your process works, what it's like working with you. And it seems so simple, but what's interesting about like the human brain and the way we think is like usually we're either here or like it's way out here, and it's like finding that like middle ground. And that's kind of what I do with clients every day, is like kind of bring it in and just being like, okay, what are the biggest pain points? What are you looking to accomplish? And just being really transparent and honest.
Yeah.
And figuring out, because sometimes they come, like a client will come to me and say, hey, I want a website. And it's like, okay, what's not working with your current website? Let's first dive into that. Because there could be things that are not seen that are going on, and want to make sure making the right recommendations for you.
Right.
And it's like having those kind of conversations are really beneficial versus like, oh yeah, I'll do that. And then just like run with whatever they want to do, because sometimes it's like there are a lot of ways that can be more streamlined, whether it's saving money or building a like higher profit margin. Like there's just so many different ways.
One of my favorite goals is to simply try to talk them out of buying something, because if they really need it, if they truly need it, then yes, we're going to move forward. But if it's something that's like, yeah, it could be okay, I'd rather they save their money until they actually can benefit them and see a real benefit. It sounds kind of like same mentality here. I want to cycle back real quick to something you said earlier about when you were crafting your strategies, onboarding, you also thought about the exit strategy, which is something I don't think a lot of people really give a lot of thought and attention to when they're starting a company. Talk to me a little bit about A, why you thought that was important, and B, what you did for it.
I thought that the exiting strategy was really important, especially with clients, because if they're leaving, I want to know what was successful during that time, what could have been improved, what types of technologies and things that they see that I should be focusing on.
Yeah.
That's another one. And then also, how can I benefit them in the future outside of doing business? Because there's one thing to be said about doing a job and just getting paid, being done.
Yeah.
And then moving on to the next one. But there is something to be said of really caring about people and like want to see them be successful beyond the relationship that you built. And also thinking about how can I send more people different ways and connect them. I don't know. There's just something wonderful about building communities and seeing people interact in a way that it's going to benefit them.
I love that. I really do. Talk to me a little bit about, let me back up and give some context here. Through the conversations I've been having, it seems like there's typically phases of your company. The first couple of years are you're kind of figuring it out, then you kind of get your stride, and then maybe like year 5, like things are really gearing in, and then there's different phases above that. Have you seen different phases or different different phases of your company over the last 5 years?
Yes, and something that I do every quarter is actually have a what are we doing well, what aren't we doing well, and like constantly improving.
Yeah.
And it's weird because it's like you're kind of having a board meeting in your head sometimes, but sometimes you're working with contractors too, and I think it really helps when leaning into client insights when onboarding, exiting, those strategies. It also taking those insights and improving your business based off of those insights, I think is really beneficial. And so in the beginning, it was a lot of setup. It was figuring out the financial, legal, and just the system side of how do I want to track my time?
Yep.
How do I want to introduce like a branding package? Like all of those things. Granted, had a lot of that experience beforehand, but it was just fine tuning it to a way where it was a lot more streamlined, and also figuring out who the particular audience I wanted to work with, which are leaders who are looking for visual identity and an online presence that's more clear and concise and unique.
How long did it take you to find that target market?
It was an evolution.
Yeah?
So it was kind of always in the back of my mind, but it wasn't until these last 2 months have I really crafted it. Because for the first 4 years of...
This is interesting. It's taken 4 years to kind of identify this. Please, sorry,
Yes.
keep going. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the whole evolution process. But the reason why it took 4 years is because I was always putting clients first.
Yeah.
And always making sure their needs were met. And I wasn't focusing on my own company's branding.
Yeah.
And it's just like the plumber's toilet's always broken kind of saying. And it's like, in order to really go that next step, I need to take a step back and focus on what I'm doing. Because it's like I'm telling them in person, but public awareness, nobody knows really what I'm doing.
Right.
And so that was a shift, and I joined the SBA Thrive cohort, which is a very intense 6-month course where you probably spend 10 hours a week, like really focusing on leadership and company culture, IP, legal, finance, all that sort of thing. And a lot of it was a refresher for me, but at the same time, there were these key points of, even though I know a lot of these things,
there's always something new.
It also is bringing you back into thinking about it again.
Oh, okay.
I think it's also trying to build systems that work really well in the beginning versus trying to do it later. And starting out small and lean, and then scale when it makes sense to. But one of the biggest reasons why businesses fail is they scale too fast. And that's something that I've always been really conscious of and just want to stay small. And especially with AI technology and different things that are coming out, I see a lot in the future where it is going to be more leaner, mighty like teams.
Absolutely. I agree. So let's talk about that a little bit, because not AI specifically, because in the motion world, I am so sick of talking about AI. I'm not going to lie. I'm so sick of it. But what does the next 5 years for you look like?
That's a great question, because in the SBA class, we just actually presented a 3-year growth plan yesterday. And it was, so what I'm going to focus on is really lean in on the strategic communication skills that I have currently, and really tell people why the business could bring value to you, how it can, and also what services can be provided. And that way of thinking and like doing it in a public way, helps people. It helps build awareness of what you're actually doing, and also what sets you apart from other people. And I think as a freelancer, as an entrepreneur, as a company of 1 or 1,000, it's also figuring out what do you bring to the table that's different than anyone else, because everyone has different experiences in their life. And they have different thought patterns and like the way that their brain connects, whether it's with people or technology. I just think humans are amazing. And it's fun to see when people have those aha moments. And for the longest time, because of the creative work that I do, a lot of people think it's subjective, like, oh, I don't need that. I'll just DIY it, or and that sort of thing, which is like, it's fine. Some people do a really great job at it. But I think the biggest thing is having a strong understanding of who you are, who you serve, and like what kind of value those two connect with.
So as you were going through the program, what did you discover about yourself, or rediscover maybe?
That I was being too quiet. I've just been kind of head down, doing lots of work, creating great results for clients, but not sharing any of that.
The whole working in the business and not working on the business.
Correct.
Gotcha.
And that was just kind of that pivotal moment of, let's balance this. Let's do both. And it's tough. It's very much kind of like work-life balance. There isn't such a thing as work-life balance. It's just, you have a
Some
little
days
bit
are
more.
gonna suck more.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, it doesn't exist.
I agree. I full-heartedly agree. There are days you're like, you know what, I'm going to be working until midnight, but tomorrow maybe I'm working until 11 a.m. and I'm done for the. I never worked out. I always work later than that. Let's be honest. I am curious because your husband is an animator and you are a designer. How often do your guys' projects overlap?
We have done 4 projects together.
In 5 years.
In 5 years, we own our own companies. This wasn't by design, but it just happened. And
Yeah.
I think it's healthy too, as we could do a whole podcast on like working with your spouse, because it's
that
not.
might be the version 2.
Yeah. And because there's an art and a science to it. And the first project, I will say, that did not go very well. And it was more on me than it was on him. And it's like, you got to separate like the wife and husband, or just like
From the business partner.
From the business partner. And from there is like, okay, when that project was a little bit rocky, we sat down and we talked about, okay, do we want to continue to do this together? And it was like a yes, but it's like, but in smaller pieces, or just in like
different quantities or different ways.
Different ways. And he's like, okay, then let's figure out how we can work together more effectively.
Yeah.
And then it was just a lot more like, I think honesty comes out a lot more with your significant other or family member. And that's where
I start to forget the compliment sandwich.
Yep. And it's like, no, I need to treat him like a client.
Yep,
like,
absolutely.
This is different. And anyways, 3 more projects since then, and he's been amazing to work with. And he has been the whole time. But it's just like kind of those first kind of like humps of just like figuring out, how do you work together as
it's a challenge.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. Like I said, my first company, my wife and I, we ran it together for 7-8 years. It was a minute. And I think now, post that company, now that she's taken over and it's evolved strictly into photography and I'm no longer involved, which is really nice, we have more things to talk about at the dinner table. Whereas beforehand, it was just, what should we do for business reason XYZ? So there's definitely something to be said there too. So kudos for you guys for like keeping it separate, because that's a really easy trap to fall into.
Yeah.
I don't even really know where I want to go at this point. Any advice and tips you want to share? Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Someone wants to start their own company, their own freelance journey or studio. What advice and tips would you give for them?
I think one of the biggest benefits as a freelancer or starting your own company is understanding what the need is that you are trying to convey to someone else. Yeah. And when doing the 3-year growth plan, someone had reached out to me this morning and texted me that was in the class, and they're just like, I've never ever thought about branding before. Like in a visual way, like I didn't ever think it mattered. It mattered.
Yeah.
And he's like, but the way that you talked about it and the way that you showed me why it matters, like it changes my whole perspective.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really important too, is that it's not always visual, but sometimes it's communicative. And I think at the base of design work, it's about your business goals and your business values and your messaging and how you talk with your employees and what the expectations are of those employees. Like that's a brand. And design is secondary. If it wasn't for businesses, I wouldn't exist. Like There's like that sort of thing where like I would exist, but I wouldn't be doing what I do
Right.
in the branding sphere, because that's the important part. The design comes second and marketing comes second. But sometimes people tend to think that comes first and like just push it. And it's like, if you have a good foundation, a system, the way that you talk, or how your business and how your employees talk, that is a huge, huge benefit.
It's so much more than just logos and a color.
Yeah. But if you can visually convey what they're saying into a logo, into a brand, because colors and the psychology of fonts and all of that really play into and can be infused into the branding.
So how do you take your branding and still have a style that you are known for, or is it strictly just what the client needs and your style doesn't matter? Because that is a hard conversation for people sometimes.
It took me 7 years to figure out my style.
Yeah.
It really did. And it's just very clean, concise, but it does vary. But a lot of the same components of understanding color theory and some of those things stay throughout. Because I've worked with a one-person tutoring business where it's super colorful and super fun, where there's where I'm also working with an insurance company here in town where it's very white and airy, but it always has kind of this clean, concise aesthetic to it all. And that's kind of, the aesthetic is what usually people, like, that's the reason why they first come into the door and ask for work, but then they realize that there's way more to this. It's also building connections. For example, with the tutoring business, she was looking to get into the homeschool community, and I said, here's a person, and I'm going to introduce you over email. And it was just those giving more value on top of just the design work.
Yep.
And then also she was looking into doing a subscription-based program and helped craft with her how she would structure that out, because she just wanted that input. And it made such a better experience for both of us. And I love seeing it when a client is super successful in their business, or that they have that aha moment of like, yes, this is the direction I want to go in. And you just had that vision to bring me there.
Oh, I love that. I'm getting all like giddy over here. Like, yes, it is. And it's true, because it really is all about like building those relationships, building that experience, so someone actually feels like they're not just paying $1 for a service. Because when you do that, like, then you don't get the word of mouth referrals. You don't do what you've done. Is there a certain range of business that you like to work with? More startups, more mid-season, more mature?
I would say mid to seasoned. I think that it's really working with leaders who have a vision, who want more of a visual communication and strategy behind their vision, and just being like, yes, this is like, here's all the pieces and parts that I would like. And then I will fill in some of those blanks and also ask them questions where they may have not even thought about a certain part of their business before. And I'll be like, well, have you thought about, like, for example, recently had a business owner have a 3D like Uline box that they were shipping out for $8.
Yeah.
And right away she was looking to save money. And I looked at that right away and I'm like, okay, it's just got a sticker. It's plain on the outside. She wants to design this box. But what if we made it flat? And I brought it to the post office. I made a mock-up for her and figured out that she could save, I think it was like 66% on all of her shipping.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah. And so it's like having those kind of skill sets are way beyond just design work. And it's looking at a problem with a new kind of solution. And I haven't actually by the time that this comes out, this will be a thing. But I was just thinking about one of the tutoring client again, where it's like pencils and erasers and just this really fun crayon drawing type environment and branding that I've built for her. And she's like, I would like to have a business card. And a lot of times people think business cards are dead. But I think if it has value and a use,
people will hang on to it.
People will hang on to it. Otherwise, if it's just a printed one that's kind of crappily printed, 90% of those go away.
Yep.
So what I'm going to do for her, and I haven't even told her this yet, but it's kind of, is that I just thought about getting blank pink erasers and doing a stamp.
That's simple.
It's simple, but it's so effective.
Yeah.
And it's a new way of thinking outside of the box. Like, it's just, but yet it's still on brand for her and it's useful.
I love that.
It's a win-win all around.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Kristi, I think we hit everything I wanted to talk about today. So
Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for the show
thank you
today.
so much for having me today, Drysen.
Yeah.
It's been so much fun.
Good.
Appreciate it.
Good. I'm glad. And if you guys are still watching and have not liked or subscribed to Frame One, please do so because you're missing out. And as always, thanks for watching.